everybody to the City of Albany Industrial Development Agency IDA Audit Committee. Today is Monday, March 9th. We are beginning this meeting at 2:30. And we will note that all members of the IDA Audit Committee are present, as well as the EC and our representatives from Tilbeck, Richmond. Since the minutes of the previous meeting have been distributed, we'd like to call for approval of the Audit Committee meeting minutes of October 15th, 2019, and with a provision that we will dispense with an official reading of those minutes.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Darius, second by Dominic, all in favor?
Aye.
The minutes of the October 15th meeting are approved. Any unfinished business? We want to attend to this meeting? Okay. If not, we will move into new business, and we will start with a review of the draft 2019 audited financial statements. I'd like to note that in the previous minutes, we noted that one of the procedures that we wanted to make sure that we put in place in this process that was a little different than past processes were that Tilbeck or Tremonti would distribute the bond assurance confirmation letters rather than agency staff. They have done that and worked cooperatively with agency staff to do that, and the results were very good. We have the vast majority of those bond confirms in, still working on one more, but we are in very good shape to have this finalized. I give to Tilbeck and Tremonti and Mark to update us and walk us through the audited financial statements for a recommendation to the full board afterwards.
Thank you. To start, for the IDA, just a brief overview of the draft. In the current year, as in previous years, we've issued an unmodified or clean opinion. So we encountered no issues that would cause us to modify our opinion. And there were no new accounting pronouncements or standard changes in the current year that were applied to the IDA. And as previously mentioned, we did also adjust our auditing procedures this year over the outstanding revenue bonds. And we coordinated sending out the confirmations as well as receiving those back. And to date, we are just waiting on one for the IDA. If we go to the independent auditor's report in the draft packet, here we are just outlining responsibilities, opinions, and any other matters that need to be communicated. So in the first section of the management's responsibilities, this is just stating that management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with U.S. GAAP. And that responsibility also includes the design, implementation, and maintenance of internal controls relevant to preparing those financial statements. Next is the auditor's responsibility, and this outlines our responsibility, which is to express an opinion as to whether the financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with GAAP. And it also states that our audits are conducted in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States and government auditing standards as well. And these standards require us to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement. And this section also states that we consider internal control over financial reporting as a basis for designing our audit procedures, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the internal controls themselves. On the next page, here we have our opinion, and as I stated, this was an unmodified and clean opinion. We didn't encounter any issues that would require that to be modified. Next, in the other matters paragraph, this is just regarding the supplementary information that is also presented. We have the management's discussion and analysis, as well as the budgetary comparison supplemental schedules in the back of this report. And this is basically just stating that we're not expressing an opinion on these statements, on those supplemental schedules, and the procedures are limited over what we did over those additional disclosures. So if we head into page 3, this section is the management's discussion and analysis. And this is summarizing the activity that occurred during the year, financial operation highlights, as well as any projects occurring during the year and some upcoming projects. This goes through to page 7, and then on page 8, we start with the audited financial statements. So here we have the statement of net position. You can see that cash did increase during the year as a result of the increase in fee revenues. So this increased the unrestricted net position up to about $3.3 million in the current year. So we've seen a consistent rise in that. On the next page, page 9, here's the statement of revenues, expenses, and the changes in the fund position. And we can see here the increase in the agency fees. On page 10, we have the statement of cash flows, or that will explain the change in that increase in cash balance. You can see is mainly driven from the receipts from fees and expenses staying relatively consistent as well. As far as the notes to the financial statements, there hasn't been any big changes from the prior year. Really, the only item that is outstanding at this point is the bond confirmations, which is in note 5. You can see we've highlighted that total amount there. That's just from the prior year. So when we receive that last remaining confirmation back, we'll be able to update that for you as well. And then we've also have the supplementary information disclosures on Schedule 1, the upper right-hand corner there. This is the budget to actual comparison that will display the variances throughout the year, all summarized on this sheet here. Does anyone have any questions on these so far? No? All right. And the last section in the package is the report on the internal controls over the financial reporting. So essentially what this is stating is this is a requirement in accordance with government auditing standards that we've considered the internal controls over the financial reporting. We haven't issued an opinion on those, however. We just take those into consideration when we develop certain audit procedures and tests. So the outstanding items for the IDA is just the receipt of the remaining bond information, which Mark may have been helping us contact banks if necessary to move those along. So we just have that one outstanding, and then we will also have the outstanding legal representation letters as well. So once we receive those back, then we can issue the final reports to you.
Thank you, Emily. Nathan, anything to add?
Nope. Emily, do you want to just talk about the communication to the...
Sure. We have this letter. I'm not sure if you have this in your packet or not. This is something that is communicated annually and you'll receive in your final draft. Basically what this is just going over the responsibilities in relation to the financial statement audit.
Would you like us to make copies of that quickly?
Yeah, if you don't mind. I'm
sure.
sorry that it wasn't included in the
Yeah.
when we sent over to Mark. This is a typical annual report that we give to you guys.
It doesn't need to be signed. It's just a
It's just
communication.
our communication to you as the board of management, and if there was any instances of any issues throughout the audit, which Emily's going to review, there was not. So we can go over that in a sec. Sorry about the.
Mark, anything to add?
Nope. Like I said, it was smooth. It's not typical this early in the game to have some outstanding items like we've discussed. So we will have those all in, and we will be on time for our March 31st reporting with the State Controller's Office. So.
I think one of the things that we always like to highlight, both during the fall and during this meeting, is sort of how the work had progressed with Tilbecker. Throughout, it's been smooth throughout the process. You know, again, this being the first year that we had the firm do the bond confirms, it was very helpful to staff to be able to have external eyes on that and working through. I think we ran into some of the same roadblocks that
Yep.
we did. I think some of the the reporting to folks we're used to hearing from us. So there were hiccups early on and getting contacted by someone that they weren't used to getting contacted from, but we worked through those really well. And the team was really great about communicating throughout, making it smooth. So the performance of the firm was much appreciated. It's been very helpful to be able to have a group that knows the organization, knows the reporting procedures, and didn't have a learning curve on just sort of who we are and how we operate to be in. So that has been really helpful to maintain consistency there.
Well, we appreciate that.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, the report looks great. We'll look forward to the final report and the
Great.
additional letter that will be added to it. In the meantime, we have plenty of information to take a favorable recommendation to the full board for the next, for approval at the next IDA meeting.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Darius. Dominic, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will favorably recommend the 2019 audited financial statements then to the full board. Thank you. With that, we will move on to a review of the draft 2019 annual report, procurement report, and investment report. We'll be starting with the annual report, which is due to the authority's budget office on March 31st. We have had good success with reporting these. We have 64 out of 67 reported. 18 of those projects are under construction, and a lot of very positive information contained in the summary page that everybody should have in front of them. Break this down a bit, Sarah?
That sounds great. And I am lucky to have a lot of tap dancing to do that is on schedule, tap dancing, before Andy comes back with the audit letters. A couple of sort of overview points. I know you all know this, but I do just want to make sure that we are refreshing everybody around the table on our procedures here. You do have a summary sheet in front of you that we will go through pretty explicitly. Andy's going to talk through some of the overall stats first, and we'll spend some time diving into any project that is delinquent or underreporting. But a couple of things of note. First, we do start this process, thanks Andy, in the previous year for reporting on active projects at the Industrial Development Agency. All active projects are required to report to us, as well as provide us with required documentation, such as sales tax exemption forms, insurance certificates. We collect all of those as sort of a snapshot as of December 31st of the reporting year, and spend the first quarter working through an analysis of those documents, determining that all of the information is complete as provided, and then also diving into if on the jobs reporting specifically, if a project has underreported their jobs based on what was estimated and committed to in their application and closing documents, that we are receiving information to them as to why they've missed the mark on that jobs reporting, so that we can bring that back to you. As we go through those projects, bear in mind that the City of Albany Industrial Development Agency for older projects did not have a recapture provision in place, and so in terms of monitoring the jobs reporting in particular, we are limited in what we are able to do about a number of those projects, unless they are one of the newer projects that does have a recapture provision in place, and we'll note those going forward. The adopted procedures for our recapture provision, and also sort of soft policy, what the IDA has really been looking for on jobs reporting in years past, are the projects meet at least 80% of their reporting requirement. We will review all projects that are off the mark at all, but that 80% threshold is something that is baked into our recapture policy. It's as well as what we will look for really a lot of depth of information on, even if a project does not have a recapture provision in place. For projects that have a recapture provision and do not meet that 80% threshold, our recapture policy states that the board will review each of those projects for potential recapture. Spoiling Andy's good news, we don't have any projects at this point that have a recapture provision that are under 80% of their projected jobs. So this won't come into play this year, but just know going forward that will trigger a review for recapture. It does not necessarily state that we will recapture those projects, because if the board deems the rationale that they have in front of us is meaningful and realistically responsible for the underperformance in jobs, or if they are, overperforming in every other area that they had committed to the IDA on, the IDA does not need to recapture benefits provided, but they can if those explanations fall short, and if the board deems fit that will happen. Again, we're not going to be in that position this year based on the projects that have recapture versus don't have recapture in their closing documents, but just by way of overview for where we are. One other thing to stress before I kick it over to Andy. We are at, what is today, March 9th. So we have, let's steal Andy's term, a lot of runway before we hit submit on the Paris forms to the state at the end of the month. We are in excellent shape this year compared to previous years. Mark, Andy, and Virginia have been doing a really great job following up with each of these groups. We have nearly all of our projects have reported. We're in contact with most of the projects that either haven't or that we've got questions with to be able to get information. We're confident that by the end of the month, we'll have these spreadsheets updated. We'll have the Paris reports updated to be able to have an on-time submission that is complete to the state. That means that today you're going to have incomplete information in front of you. We are going to bring this conversation, as we always do, back to the Finance Committee as well as to the full board next week. So you'll get even additional information beyond what we'll go through here today over the next 2 weeks, and we will really be working toward the 31st as the deadline to have complete information in there. Missing anything else overview-wise on this? So I think with that, I'll kick it over to Andy and have him walk us through the reporting for this year.
Great, thank you. And as Sarah said, I think the overall theme here is we're in really good shape. Kind of drilling down from the overview, we have in 64 of 67 straight lease projects have reported to us, so it's 96%. These projects are under construction, so that really speaks to the volume of activity that this agency has seen in about the last 2 years. That number should remain relatively the same going forward with the amount of new projects that we see coming in and in the pipeline. So something to keep in mind. For those projects that are under construction and that receive a sales tax exemption abatement, we've received all ST 340 forms, which are the forms required to be reported not only to us but to New York State, reporting the sales tax abatements taken by the project beneficiaries, and no one has gone over, so there will be no sales tax recapture this year, which is great news. Of the 67 straight lease projects, 35 are reporting as having created 100% or more of the jobs that they expected to create. 12 of the 67 projects are reporting fewer jobs than estimated, and only 7 of those 55 or 13% are reporting jobs less than 80% of projections. And as Sarah alluded to, those projects do not contain typical recapture provisions. They're, for the most part, older projects. Only 3 of the 67 straight lease projects, so about 4%, have not reported any data to us to date. There is still time to do that. 2 of those 3 projects are 960 Broadway and Nipper Apartments. The third is Eleftheria. Joe Scott and his office have been looped in to kind of help us navigate these projects and help these project beneficiaries get the information in and figure out how to go about finding that in the case of 960 and Nipper. So we are working with that. We do expect to have detailed updates on those 3 in the coming days and weeks. With that, I will note that I had printed out a new sheet that has numbers on the sides so we can refer to it by kind of a line item number. If that makes things easier for everybody to pinpoint where we're going as we jump around. What I want to start to do is look at each project that is under reporting and speak to them.
I do want to jump in. I am delinquent on the most important thing that I was supposed to go over as part of my overview. You have the summary sheet in front of you, but in the packets that were provided and posted last week, you do have the draft Paris report, page by page for every single project that contains additional data. You do have that for your review. We have it up on the screen as well if there's anything that you'd like to get into further here at the table today, and that is available to the entire board as well. So while we're presenting a snapshot for efficiency here today, and staff has done a fantastic analysis going through, that all of that information is available to you for your review prior to the March 31st deadline. Sorry, Andy.
Nope, great. So coming down to line 3, if you will, 1475 Washington Ave Associates. They are projected creating and retaining 7 full-time equivalent jobs. They are reporting 6, which is 1 shy. As of December 31st, 2019, they had 2 vacant part-time positions open, which they're working to fill. They had actually encountered a similar issue last year. They had filled other positions, so they're just dealing with trying to address some turnover in part-time positions. And stop me if there's any specific questions or need for detail. And Mark and Virginia, if I'm missing anything that's relevant, please jump in. Coming down 1 line to 4048 South Pearl Street. This is a project that received just sales and mortgage recording tax exemption assistance. We've had this conversation surrounding this project in years past. They had originally projected 39 FTEs, which we've all kind of looked at and thought might have been a little high at the time. They are working diligently to tenant the food court space. They have increased their jobs from 2018 from 4 to 8, and we are working with them as they work to fill that space out. Right now they have 3 tenants of 7 stalls, and they're in talks with at least another 1 or 2 more tenants to get in that space.
As you'll recall, this is the old Pagliacci space, and when the new owners took over, they were in lease negotiations with a major national tenant that they felt comfortable with that tenant, that there would be higher than normal restaurant employment at the site. When they lost, when those negotiations had stopped, they're looking at, I can't even say more of a traditional model since it's a food court model, but a more traditional and realistic for this market restaurant concept that would come with much fewer jobs than what was originally projected for the national tenant.
Coming down to 7, as we spoke about Eleftheria, we've contacted Joe's colleague, Mike Logan, to just kind of help us assisting in getting those forms in. So we'll work to do that and update you as they come in. Skipping down to line 9, Park South Partners. This is the residential component of the Park South redevelopment. They are reporting 2 fewer jobs, 9 out of 11 than they had projected. They've reported that there have been some design changes that have required less maintenance and upkeep and have hired less workers as such. One thing they did report on a positive note is that the residential units are 98% occupied, which is great news for that project. Coming down to 132 State Street, that is Capital Bank. We have reached back out to them just to get a little bit more color. They have trended downward in their jobs reporting to 14 from 20 last year, with reporting temporary vacancies due to staffing changes. We'll just be looking to see if that's a short term or if we can expect to see that in a little bit longer term, depending on the temporary nature of the staffing changes. So we'll have more color on that project in the near future. 144 State Street is the Renaissance Hotel. They've reported about 58 less jobs than they had projected, 104 to 162. In years past, they had been staffing up, and they had also had a little bit less activity from the banquet portion of the project than they had expected. We've reached back out to them to get a lot more color on this as well, to see exactly what's going on there, if they're expecting to trend upwards, and we'll have more detail coming back on that. I apologize, I've neglected to mention, if you look at the third column all the way from the right, so there's the notes column, the pilot end date, and then a column labeled recap. That's if a project has a recapture agreement. So I should have mentioned that, so you can see right away if there is one in place for a project. This project does not have the typical recapture agreement in place. Staff did, as per the audit and guidance from the comptroller's office. This project was one of the projects that we chose randomly to monitor, and staff was inside the hotel for a tour towards the end of 2019, and it was extremely busy. We actually had to wait quite a bit of time for a room to open, so we know there is activity there. We know they're doing well, so we'll try to flesh out this story as best we can in speaking with hotel management.
So this is a great place to highlight too, just to remind the committee that we do have a jobs reporting form that asks for notes to be provided if they are reporting what their projected job count had been. This is an area where if staff has additional questions beyond what notes came in, we will always go back out to try to get a little bit more depth and a little bit more color on the note that was provided. This is an example of a case where the note had just said that they had not received the amount of business anticipated. And so we definitely want more information from them on that, related to that drop and why behind that. And so that's something that we're working through and we'll have by the end of the month.
Coming down to line 16, 40 Steuben. That project unfortunately lost the Steuben market. As we all know, their tenant vacated the premises in third quarter into fourth quarter of 2019. They're working to re-tenant that space. We've reached out to them just to make sure that there are indeed 0 FTEs associated with that project, including any building management, things of that nature. But we will update that as soon as we receive an answer. One line down from there, 412 Broadway, which this is a positive story. They have been doing a great job fitting out that space and tenanting that space up. There's only one storefront still vacant in that space, so they are down one job from their projected 8. They're at 7. Coming down to line 25, Albany Med Science Research. This is a project dating back about 6 or 7 years. The IDA was initially involved simply because of the fact there was a difficulty tenanting and fitting out the space, necessitating IDA assistance to keep the project feasible. They are reporting 85 of a projected 287 jobs. We've reached out just to get a general update on who's in there, if they have any prospects. We've seen their realtor and that project beneficiary come for the committee and board in the past to receive permission for certain tenants to occupy the space. So we know that they are actively working to do that. Line 30, Columbia 50 New Scotland. That is one of the projects on the New Scotland Ave, Albany Medical Center redevelopment blocks, if you will. They've reported 54 less jobs than they had projected. Their decrease is due to staff having been moved to offsite locations. We've reached out to get more details on that and to see if they expect to backfill those positions with new employees and what they're going to be doing with that space if they have significant free space due to that. So we will have a lot more detail on that project. Of note, there is no recapture agreement associated with that project. Coming down to Dilek LLC. We did receive their jobs form. Still, they have been unable to tenant that space. We expect to be speaking to the committee and board at length in the future on this project.
We actually expect them to come to
That's
the
right.
next meeting or so.
We've requested their presence at either the finance committee or the upcoming board meeting to speak to the progress or lack thereof on that site.
For last month's board meeting.
Excuse me, line 35, Fuller Road Management Corp. That is Kieran Building. They have trended a little bit downward. They're at 98 of 250 projected jobs. We're reaching out for more detail. In years past, there has been, they've been reporting on their full-time equivalent employees, not on a basis of who has access to the building. For instance, this year they reported.
They have over 300 people with access to the building,
Correct.
but they're only reporting 98 jobs. And they've always felt that they're counting the people that are there all the time. So some of these people might be assigned to that building, but they, for whatever reason, don't feel comfortable putting that number down on the sheet of paper.
So they might be remote employees that are based out of the building. So they're being very conservative, which in one sense is a very good thing. They're being very conservative on the number of employees in the building. This is another example of where this is a snapshot at December 31st. One of the tenants in the building had significant seasonal employment throughout the year. They increased those numbers, however, at December 31, those employees weren't in the building, and so the usage would have been higher given a measurement on it at a different point in the year. But as of the closeout of 2019, you know, they're reporting the under 100 employees on site.
And coming down to line 42, Sheridan Hollow Enterprises. That is the commercial component of the Sheridan Hollow redevelopment. As we know, unfortunately, they lost their tenant, the Hungry Hollow. They're short 2 jobs on a projected 16. They're reporting 14. We know that they're trying to re-tenant that space. And as with all of these spaces that are vacant, if there's any ability for us to assist in connecting a prospective tenant with one of these project beneficiaries that does have space, we do our best to do that to facilitate getting these job numbers up and getting the space leased out as well. And that would be no different for this project here. The last 2 that you'll see in quite a bit of yellow, lines 48 and 49, again, are 960 and Nipper. We're working diligently to get more information from the receiver and the equity partners that have now stepped in to both these projects. We're hopeful that we're going to have a call this week with one or both of those entities to really see where they're at, and if there's anything we can do, any advice we can give in order for them to be able to track down some of this information and submit it to us prior to the 31st. And as far as the straight lease projects go, that is where we're at.
I think I'd point out, unless I'm wrong and the equations stop a little bit earlier, when you see the roll up at the bottom for retained and created versus the reported jobs for 2019, it looks like a net loss on the sheet. However, that includes the jobs that are projected for the projects that are under construction. And so we are actually at a net positive. There's about 250, just under 250 jobs represented in those projects that are under construction, which shouldn't be reporting full-time equivalent jobs at this point since they are under construction. So if you just look at the completed projects, we're at a net gain on jobs reported.
Can I get to go back to the Fuller Road one? That brings up the point of the possibility that there's a way that we might have to change the definition of what a employee is about not being in a building, if that's the base, because there's more and more of the, companies that are allowing you to people to work from home, even though that is their office, but, they go in once a week or once every couple of weeks or something, or 3 times a month or something. Just to show that, because there's still employees of this company and they're working here, but because of the remote, today's change of way people can do their jobs, that it may need to be somehow be noted, or a definition change or something along the line to show that.
I think that's why they're they're actually reporting the key access to the building, because they're aware of
Right,
that.
yeah, but they don't want to put that number in there, you said.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean.
Because, yeah, we tried a few years ago to tell them if their home base is that building, they should be counted as part of that number. They still, with the commuting population and the people that are in there, they might not be in there, a couple hours a week, they were uncomfortable counting them.
Right, but that's what I mean, if there's a way to do it so that they might think maybe there's a legal issue there or liability or some type of issue legally, and they don't want to be in trouble, if there's a way that maybe, we can get a change, or maybe the public, authority, budget officer, somebody could come up with something to protect those companies that are like that, and, because again, it hurts the numbers, but they're really based out of that building, but
Is
if
there
they're,
any
if they're
guidance from-
afraid to show it because of the way they might read a definition or the law.
Is there any guidance from the ABO on this, or should we request guidance?
So we do rely on the definitions set by the ABO for this, and it is our understanding that the way that the current definitions read, they do include employees that are based out of the location, but are remote employees. We do find from time to time across all of our reporting projects that staff changes frequently at the applicant shop. So basically, you might have someone reporting this year that was not the person in place last year, that might be a little bit more nervous or a little bit more conservative related on their counts. And so we do try to provide them with the definition as provided by the authority's budget office. We rely though on the reporting of the project sponsor and that is attested to by the project sponsor for who's on site. And so, there's only so much we can do in terms of showing them definitions and working through to be able to provide an accurate count for what's at the building related to that. That's why we have incorporated site visits again into our reporting procedures as well. It is something that I think, and I don't know if there's a statewide conversation going on related to updating these definitions, because the nature of commercial office work has changed so dramatically. If there is something that either the Economic Development Council is working on, or the ABO or OSC directly on being able to address this more thoroughly, because of, we have so many more office tenants now that will have this come up in their annual reporting.
We can look into that. The note section that we have here on the summary sheet, are those notes that are also provided on the Paris report, or is there somewhere on the Paris report that you have the opportunity to clarify what's going on?
There is a note section that we can add whatever we would like to project to the reader of that report. So we could add notes as needed to that report.
And we have done that in the past, particularly where there is someone that had such an overestimation that they're never going to be able to meet realistically, that we're noting that it is something that the board reviewed and was able to provide background on. And so there are a number of these that we'll flag specifically for notes in the Paris report. This notes column in particular, that this is mostly what the company had reported back to us on their jobs reporting sheet for the committee to be able to see the narrative that they provided. But I'd say there's probably fewer than 6 actual notes that would be putting on the Paris report at this point, because we were able to clean a lot of those notes up after we reopened the full report following our recent audit that had been conducted. And so we had opened the full system, changed everything that needed to be changed that we had previously been reflecting in the notes field. And so, we're now down to, I think, a manageable level of notes on that, but we'll be using that field as necessary to catch the nuances on some of these that the numbers don't really highlight.
Any other questions on the Paris reporting?
We're going to run through the bonds
Yes,
quickly.
real quick. Sure. I know Mark, Ethan, and Emily kind of touched on the bonds. We're in similarly good shape. We're only missing one jobs form and one confirm for the IDA portion of the bonds. All of the entities reporting are reporting jobs at levels well in excess of 80%. And there's only one entity that is slightly underreporting. So generally, we're doing very well. On the bond side of things, for the IUA, project by project, if you'd like, that's kind of the high level rundown of the bonds.
How many bonds?
18.
Are they listed anywhere?
You've got them in your Paris report.
Yeah, to be honest, the tracking sheet we use is it's a lot simpler than this. I didn't print it out for everyone I could. It really just tracks if they sent in their forms, what the jobs were, the confirms, if those were received, if they're accurate.
Why don't you go ahead and just run through them real quick?
Sure, sure. Something of note, Art and Associates, which had underreported significantly in the previous year, just repaid their bonds, so they're not reporting. That will not be anything we need to look into further as we have in years past. They had a lot of trouble tenanting that space that was off of Clara Barton Drive over. I'm gonna leave off unless you want me to the schedule of the bonds. I'll just say the name of the
Yeah.
entity. Brighter Choice, they've reported well in excess of the 19 jobs that they had initially reported to. They're reporting 83, which is 64 jobs over. The CHF Holland Suites, they have met their job creation number. There were 4 total jobs. Creighton Story Homes, they hadn't projected creating any jobs. They're still reporting as such. They have sent in their forms. The series of bonds associated with the Daughters of Sarah, they had originally projected 211 retained and created jobs. They are now reporting 291, so they've increased employment significantly at that site on Washington Ave Extension. Living Resources, they had originally projected 25 full-time and retained jobs. They are now reporting as of December 31st, 2019, 200 jobs. So they've also significantly ramped up their operations. We are still working with the New York State SUNY Research Foundation to get their form in. We anticipate that will be in shortly. In years past, they have far exceeded their jobs projection number of 26. They're typically reporting in around 100. So we anticipate again that coming in. Prime Management, which is a building out on Washington Ave Extension as well. They had originally projected 220 retained and created jobs. They reported 242 this year. The RCA projects, forgive me, Mark, what does RCA stand for?
Renaissance Corporation?
There you go. Renaissance Corporation, they're reporting, they're the one entity, one of the 2 entities reporting slightly under. They had projected 9 on their application, and they're reporting out at 6, so they're 3 short. That was due to just regular employment fluctuations. Rehabilitation Support Services is reporting 46 jobs over the 9 they had originally projected as well, so they have 55 jobs. Sage Colleges is reporting under 75 jobs from the 416 they had projected, so they had reported out at 341. We'll be following up with them to get some information on that, why those jobs are lower. United Cerebral Palsy Center, they are of note. I believe this is their last year. They're a large jobs reporting entity. They're as of 2019, they reported over 1,700 jobs, and this bonds will be repaid and matured. So that will be the last year that we have those jobs reporting in to the IDA on that side.
Miss South Mall Towers.
South Mall Towers, they had originally projected 12 jobs, and they reported 9 as of 12/31/19. And we're asking them why that is. And that takes us through the bonds. University at Albany, Empire Commons, north, south, east, west, those were repaid. Those are, you'll still see them reported out on the CRC side. the IDA bonds were repaid.
Any questions or comments on the bond programs? Joe, do we need an executive session for confidential or legal issues for Sarah?
On the annual. No, not unless there are any specific questions related to litigation.
Okay, great. Well, that was a lot to take in, so why don't we go ahead and take a vote on a recommendation to, on the annual report to the full board. Favorable recommendation.
So moved.
And again, that's gonna be pending, changes that come in between now and for the month.
That we discussed.
Dominant second, all in favor?
Aye.
We will favorably report the final 2019 annual report with the additional information that we added to that then. Review of the draft 2019 procurement report is next on the agenda.
Sure. So in front of you is the annual procurement report. The agency is required to report to the ABO. Any vendor will pay over $5,000 in the calendar year, so they're listed on the next, from pages 2 through, I believe, 2 to 4. There's too many that we have, but they're all listed there.
Okay, any questions or comments on the procurement report for 2019? Okay, if not, we will take a motion to favorably recommend the procurement report to the full board.
So moved.
Carries. Dominic, second, all in favor?
Aye.
The 2019 final procurement report will be favorably reported to the full board for consideration. The review of the draft 2019 investment report is next on the agenda.
So as noted, this is a one-page document with questions. As noted in our investment report that we issue in January, the only investments of the corporation or the agency is cash, which is audited during the 2019 financial statements, which Teal Becker performed. And as noted, there was no management letter issued in connection with the investments.
Any comments or questions? Then we'll take a recommendation on the investment report.
So moved.
Yes.
Second.
Dominic, second. All in favor?
Aye.
We favorably recommend the 2019 investment report to the full board. And last, under new business is the review of management assessment of internal controls and performance measures.
This is the annual document. This is basically lists what the major business functions of the IDA were in 2019, what risks we would have associated, which pretty much this document mirrors what it was last year. And we've just updated it accordingly. And towards the end, it does the extent of which internal control system is effective, and we do note it is part of an audit. They might not issue an opinion on it, but they do look at it as in the scope of their audit.
Any questions on that? Okay, that was just for review purposes, so we
Correct.
don't need to take a recommendation on the management assessment of internal controls. But we would like to acknowledge the hard work of staff to keep all of our finances running, and also with Phil Becker Tremonti for making us through another successful audit season.
Is there anything you wanted to highlight now that we have the letter in front of us that you felt
Sure,
like we
sure. This letter is the formal letter of communication to those charged with governance. And essentially what this letter is this is a requirement, which would be to advise you of any certain matters related to the audit. And this is where we would discuss any issues that we encountered or any misstatements or concerns that we had while performing our audit regarding any significant accounting policies used by the agency. And as previously mentioned, we encountered no issues, and this letter also has no changes to the significant accounting policies section in the current year, as there were no changes to accounting standards for the Industrial Development Agency.
Great, thank you. All right, any other business to come before the committee? If none, we'll call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned at